First, if you don't mind, please turn off all your cell phones to vibrate. There's evaluations in the back, so if you can fill those out after. There's also CEU information available at the back of the room. And please make sure that your badges have been scanned. So today we're going to be talking about managing a family business. And first off, a few other things. This is an AIA CES course that is qualified. So again, thank you for attending. And as well, it's IDCEC approved. So that gives you credits that you need. Let's see. So to introduce today's panelists, we'll start with Dwayne.
Morning. Am I unmuted yet? Okay, that better, good. Once again, good morning. I'm Dwayne Nakan, the owner and CEO of Stone Interiors. I operate a countertop shop in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm actually second generation in the stone business. My father started a company called Intrepid Enterprises out of New Orleans doing high-rise commercial and beating up on poor Bob over here and back in the 80s. And then later we opened up Stone Interiors doing residential work. My father opened the first one up down in Loxley, Alabama, near Gulf Shores and the Gulf Coast there back in '97. And then I opened up our Columbia one in 2001. And then ultimately we expanded up to as many as 4 locations and have since sold those off to other local partners and all. So we'll get into that all a little bit more later.
Bob?
I'm Bob Zavagno. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I am 3rd generation in the business. We have kind of a very niche business. We just do stone installations in commercial buildings all across the country. We don't cut the stone, polish the stone. I couldn't tell you the difference between a piece of marble, a piece of limestone, or a piece of granite. All I know how to do is put it up. We have an office in Chicago and an office in Los Angeles. We only do commercial. We've been in business since 1924. We were into a lot of other things. We were in the terrazzo business. We were in the tile business. We actually were in the distribution business for a very short time back in the 80s. And then I can't give myself the credit, but I realized that we were making all of our money in the muscle, in the service and installing materials. So that's all we do. We go anywhere in the whole country except the island of Manhattan. We stay out of Manhattan. But other than that, we'll go anywhere. Hawaii, and we don't leave the country. People always ask us to do a job in Ireland or in South America, but we don't leave. And I have a son in the business, 4th generation, who just left yesterday to go do an install in Denver. Then he'll go to Detroit, and then he'll go to New Jersey, and then he'll go to San Francisco. So that's the way our business is. Our guys just move around like a mass unit and go from city to city and install stone and then move on.
Awesome. Jonathan?
My name is Jonathan Mitnick. A partner at CCS Stone. It's a 2nd generation family stone business. My father started it back in 1963 after working for IGM for a number of years, building up their Midwest business out in the Chicago area. And I grew up in a family where my father was traveling all the time. He was always in Europe, in Portugal, Spain, Italy, and he'd bring back strange things from distant lands, and that was the fascination that I had growing up as a kid. So I was kind of groomed all along the way of being in a family stone business. So it wasn't a surprise when I went to college. I decided to take courses in geology and so forth and nurture that interest. And today I run the business with 2 other brothers. We have a 38,000 square foot facility just outside of Manhattan in a town called Moonachie. So we developed the wholesale business with the slab and tile and cut the size, but also have become the first and only accredited fabricator in the state of New Jersey. So, for us, it was a great accomplishment and puts us in a different category among other fabricators in the state.
That's awesome. And my name's Katie Jensen. I'm president and co-owner of Triton Stone Group. It's a 1st generation company. We're a natural stone importer and distributor of slabs and tile. And then we also sell retail tile and sinks. excuse me, we have 22 locations across the Southeast, and we opened in 2005. So celebrating 15 years of business, and I work with I rock 5 of my 6 brothers and sisters and many in-laws. So it is very much a family business. So now maybe just some poll questions. So how many of you guys sitting at the table right here work for a family business? How many of you are first generation family business owners? And what about second or third generation? That's awesome. Congratulations. I mean, there's so many challenges working in a family business, but also many benefits. So moving on, this is just kind of a few of the learning objectives we want to go over. And honestly, we'll go through some questions, but really would love as much input and questions from the audience. So I think it's always interesting to talk to other business owners and hear, their perspectives and how they've gone through challenges.
And Katie, as questions are coming from the audience, because this is being recorded, I'll walk around with the mic so that we can record all the questions.
Oh, awesome. Okay, perfect. So first, just a little bit about how did you get into a family business? So Bob, you get to go first.
I grew up in the business. Like I said, I'm third generation. Business been in business since 1924. And that's very important, is the plan that our family had, it never works out. My grandfather, who started the business, died young. My father had to take over young. He had a brother who was his partner. They were supposed to run the business together and have their children join the business. And it worked out, but the cousins and I couldn't get along, and they left. And then we can get into that later about how bad things happen in third and fourth generation businesses. I could write a book. But the key is that just because something didn't work out doesn't mean it can't come back and everything could work out. But I got in the business because I was groomed to be in the business. I have 4 sisters and me. They're all in medicine. My father didn't believe women should be in the construction business, so it fell to me to be in it, and that was it. I started in 1986, and I'm still there now.
Still rocking and rolling.
Still trying to rock and roll.
Great. And Dwayne, what about you?
Similar kind of story. Like I say, I'm second generation in the business. We're a little bit different in that we had a first business, and then we opened the second business later. In that first business, we were in the same kind of realm as Bob, where we were doing high-rise commercial work and things like that. There were 2 other partners. One was a family member of ours. The third was not. But those 3 guys started that company. And, I kind of just grew up. My dad was one of those guys, you're not in school, you're at work. So as soon as I was old enough to work, every week, every holiday and vacation time and summer, I was there at the office, out sweeping, cutting weeds down, and doing all those kinds of things until I kind of got up a little bit further on the chain there. And it's one of those things I've always basically, and it's the same thing I do with my kids today. Dad never guarded any conversations around me. It was always whatever he was talking about or dealing with was open in front of me too. And that's kind of how I learned the business and learned how to deal with situations, and how I attempt to start doing it with my kids today. But of course my kids today have no desire to do anything but sit home and play video games, so we'll see where that goes.
And Jonathan, what's your starting story?
So, my dad kind of left it up to all of his sons. There was 4 of us all together to really decide what they wanted to do. There was always that kind of inflection where he really wanted us to join the business. He was very proud of what he had built, but we all had the freedom to do whatever we wanted to do. My oldest brother started working before all of us, and he was the first one to get fired. It was a strange thing for me. I really didn't understand. He was 6 years my senior, so lessons to be learned from your older brother. But the things that he did and it was like growing up too. It was all the things that your brother got in trouble for, that you learned and you didn't do yourself. So, my next in line went right into the business, and I was the third. And my youngest brother started out working on Wall Street. And I think that was really the best thing, where he got the experience working for a third party or a stranger, a different industry, and then deciding for himself when it was time to join a family business, and then the skills he brought to the table. So it was really kind of hit or miss. My father always wanted us to all join the business, but I guess 3 out of 4 isn't bad.
That's not so bad. Yeah, and a little bit about my story. Triton started, like I said, in 2006, and we're based in New Orleans, Louisiana. So we actually opened as a way we wanted to do something to help rebuild the city. And my father's background is in trucking and warehousing. And again, we wanted to open up a company. He had 7 children and wanted to open up something that, we could help the city rebuild. So we kind of started, and I started immediately with a brother-in-law and 2 other people, and then sisters and brothers all joined the company eventually as they graduated. And yeah, we just kind of really evolved. And I think I tell people we were too naive to think we could fail. And we just continued to sell stone and kind of have a really positive outlook on it. And from my father's perspective, I always tell people the biggest gift that he gave us was that he trusted us. And he really was not involved at all in the day-to-day of running the business. And I think that speaks volumes to an older generation really trusting their children. So we're always very thankful for that. Let's see. And then now we can talk about a few of the challenges that, that you experience, right, throughout the years. So Jonathan, what do you want to share?
So, I always think about the working relationship and the structure of that relationship that was formed that I really had no choice. I went into a family business. The structure was created by, the president of the company, who was my dad, and he's looking at everyone and saying, okay, I want everyone to work in harmony and sing Kumbaya, and those things really, they kind of, over time, the interaction between working and partner and family is a little complicated, and so what I look back at is the working agreement that he created in the late 80s for us to work together, and I think it was an important document because it was his attempt to spell out what the goals and objectives of the company were, but also, our accountabilities as workers and not just showing up for work and being a family member. It fell short on some of those things, so that's one of the points that I want to bring up, that if you do, a contractual agreement, which you should, between family members, it should spell out some of the accountabilities and be specific. Also should clearly point out who the leader is, because every family business needs a singular leader. It can't be equal decision-making across the board. And I think that was one of the learning points that I took away from all the years working in my family business, that even though it would be nice if we all worked together in harmony, but there needs to be someone who is out front making the strong decisions, willing to shoulder those decisions, and then look towards the other workers for their strengths, and those things be detailed in a working relationship that everyone can accept. It might be hard if you look at it and say, well, I want to be the boss, or I want to be the one. But being the boss is a big responsibility, and it really carries a lot of, burden with it, in terms of, driving the business, managing employees, and just, changes in how you're going to run your business when the market shifts. And I was just talking to Bob before about how every so often you need to reinvent your approach towards your business, even though you're in the stone business, has many facets. So the document, working together, should be clear, and it should be something that you can look at, and in 10 years, 20 years from now, those points hold up. Because the language that took place in the late 80s in the contract is so foreign now, because cell phones weren't even really around. Right. So you can imagine how that language is. So look at the language, make sure it covers all the points, and that everyone can work with it and be happy with it.
Sure. And Bob, for you, what are some tips to how do you avoid potential family conflict?
Well, we've had a lot of them, and I could write a book, like I said, about family conflicts, and you've been in business for 97 years. But what I tell people is if you have a family business and you're successful, that's wonderful, that's terrific. It may take the next generation, but somewhere down the line, there is going to be a huge conflict. And I give Katie all the credit in the world with her family and being able to do it, but somewhere down the line, and I'm saying this in front of everybody to you, Katie, somewhere down the line, there will be a conflict. You might be dead for 30 years before that conflict happens, but it will happen. So if your business is successful and your children are in that business and your in-laws are in that business, your cousins are in that business, make sure you build safeguards because it is going to happen. It took 75 years for our company to have a blow up. It ran smoothly for 75 years and then a bomb went off. And that was the third generation saying, I don't want anything to do with this business and I want my money. And if you give everybody a little piece of the pie because you want to feel like the great grandmother who gives out little slices of this business to your grandchildren, you're doing no favors to the people who are running the place. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be a conflict. If you're not successful, then there won't be a conflict. But everybody goes into business because they think it's going to be successful, right? Everybody goes there because they think it's going to be successful. And, we had a business, I had an uncle who owned 1% of our business. He owned 1%. Unfortunately, he became a district judge, and he made my life a living hell because he wanted his money for that 1%. He wanted out. And I said, I'm not buying you out. And he said, well, I'm a federal district judge, so we'll see what happens. I liked my uncle as a child. I didn't know he would do that to me, and he drove me out of my mind over 1% of the business.
Wow.
So, and how he ended up with 1% of the business, nobody even remembered how he ended up with 1% of the business. So all I'm saying is we all think we're going to be successful. We are going to be successful. Think positive. You're going to be successful, and your grandchildren are going to run this business one day. But the point is there's going to be a granddaughter whose husband and her live far away, own 2% of the business, and one out. And, the person who runs the business might not be able to get them out. So every successful business, that's why companies, go under sometimes because they're busy buying out, disgruntled people in the business. It'll actually put you out of business. Because believe it or not, somebody who owns just a few percentage of your business does have rights. And I just tell everybody, don't be such a sweet grandma and give away pieces of your company to people in the family give them a check. Give them some cash in an envelope. Don't give them a part of the business. But anyway, that's the thing. It's going to happen. If you're successful and you're in a family business, there's going to be a conflict. So, like I said, it might take 75 years.
Right.
But whoever gets stuck with it's going to have a mess that they're going to have to clean up.
And not to pry, but to resolve that, did you end up paying him out?
Of course.
Yeah.
I had no choice. He told me that if I didn't buy him out, he would sell his 1% to the highest bidder. And he had a lot of people out there who were willing to buy it, and they would even and as he put in the letter, they'll make your life even more difficult than I am.
Yeah. Well,
There you
congrats
go.
for
Yeah.
working through that. Again, all the different challenges, right?
Yes.
Definitely a lot sometimes. So now we can kind of jump to some of the benefits. And again, we're definitely going to have lots of time for questions. So please think of what you'd like to ask. Just the benefits. For me, I think there's so many benefits, right? Like starting a company, providing for your employees. One of the reasons I think, I get up every day is that because I'm going to work so hard and make sure that I can provide for my employees and their families. And, it's about really giving, Triton, from what I feel, and I hope all our employees feel, is truly a family. It's not just a family company, but everyone that works there. My goal is to make sure they feel like they're part of our family. And I think that's something, I don't want to say like different in larger companies or any companies, but if you can connect your employees to your family, the return that you get is tenfold. And again, it doesn't go only with money, right? It's about employee happiness and satisfaction, and just the overall general vibe and culture of a company just runs so much better. I mean, in my opinion, right, being a family business. But, some more benefits, I think, your freedom, the ability to make, decisions and be in charge of your own future, that's invaluable. And everyone sitting around the table who owns their own family business, you're true entrepreneurs, right? You are doing it while, 80% of the population isn't. So I think, that's props to everyone sitting around the table here. So I think that's just some of the benefits, and there's many more, and you're able to chart your own future. So to me, that's the most exciting thing. Dwayne, what about you?
Well, I think some of the benefits are, especially, is being able to continue to foster that relationship in your family. I worked pretty much, and I always say with my father, not for my father, but since I got out of college, I went and played politics for a year or two and then came back to the business. So you look at a lot of family dynamics and how many people get to spend that much time with a parent or vice versa with their child in developing them, building something together. So many times kids go off, they get a job, they're on another coast, they're who knows where, you see them now and then, you hear from them now and then, but to be able to go to work and spend that time with them is a great thing, as long as you get along, I guess. But if you don't, then the kid should go get a job somewhere else, But I think that's been one of the great benefits, translates into even travel and vacation, all right, okay, we're all going to the Stone Show in Italy now. Now we've got a family trip that's also a business trip. So as long as you like your family, it's a great opportunity to spend time with them and to really have that deeper kind of connection than you do in a scenario where, the kids go off to college, they go get a job, and, you see them once a month on a weekend for dinner kind of thing. So I think that's been a great experience in it. But the things you do need to watch for, and that is as your kids are growing up in that business, making sure they can step out of your shadow too. Making sure they can flourish and become their own person in the industry and find their own footing and not always be in the shadow of that dominant parent who is there and who has started things. And it doesn't mean that dynamic was ever a sticking point or anything, but it's just one of those things as the parent and then or as the kid going up in it is to be able to find your own path in that and knowing that relationship with your parent in terms of how you balance those things. I tell you, we started through 2 companies, and in that first company, I was in the much younger than some of the other partners' children, and I saw how kids could take advantage of a situation. You always hear about the scenario with a kid who's a vice president and sits in their office all day and plays golf and goes to lunch and doesn't really do any work and makes a big salary. We had those kinds of things. So I saw it from that perspective. He is a good golfer,
though.
Yeah.
He's a hell of a golfer. I know the guy he's talking about. He's a hell of a golfer. He's an incredible golfer.
But,
practice.
That's one of the things I told my father when we always talked about, well, did we want to open a second location once we got into the residential side and all? It's like, well, Dad, I'll work with you. I don't want to work for you. I need to be able to do my own sort of thing. So in our scenario, he opened up the one in Alabama. I opened the second location in South Carolina. So I kind of had my own company there. Over the years, you talk about ownerships and people getting pieces. Fortunately, I will tell you the best thing out there is to be an only child. You don't have to worry about killing off your siblings. Buying off your siblings. I'm Sicilian, buying, same thing.
I kill, same thing, right?
But, it was a scenario where, over the years, we can gradually transfer that ownership, as I stepped farther and farther up in the company and took more of a lead, and Dad tended to kind of step back over those years until you finally get to a point where he sits at home at night and goes into the computer and sends you emails going, what's this charge for $23 for this? Okay, Dad. You know, but I think one of the best benefits, like I say, is to be able to maintain that really close relationship and daily interaction with your parents.
No, it's definitely true. And let's see, any like last thoughts before we open it up to questions? Jonathan?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight the comment that Dwayne made about, spending time with your parents. My father passed away about a year ago, and my mom's still alive. But up until a few months before he died, I mean, he was pretty much at work. I mean, I felt like I was the luckiest guy in the world because, I didn't really have to go out of my way to visit my parents. They would be at the office. I mean, they really wouldn't do much, but it was that instinct that they had that drew them, year over year to the office. So they, it was really, a great thing because I knew so many people who had to, go out of their way to visit their elderly parents, or they may not be in the same state, could be, a lot of time away. And for me, every day, it was just, it was a gift. I didn't really have to work too hard at it. And I look at it as a blessing because, it gave me a lot of shared time with my parents that I probably wouldn't have had because I'm really not one of the kind of people that goes out of my way to visit people.
Right.
But, besides that, I think the family environment is very beneficial. I found that the trust that you have working with a family member is huge. You can really not have to look over your shoulder as much. When you need to do something, it's a personal issue. Everyone kind of shares their opportunities to go. And like even things like during the pandemic, we didn't really need to all show up for work. So we kind of did rotations on a day that we would have personal time to do what you wanted to do. And we're having a tough time letting go of that. We're still on that rotation, that day off.
I'm working from home today.
But these are the kind of things that you could do. If you have a family business, you can modify, design it the way that fits your needs and your family's needs.
Yeah. Bob?
I'm just going to put my Tony Robbins hat on for just a second because this is just my thing when it comes to a family business that makes me crazy, and I preach this all the time. You started your business because you thought that your product was the best or you were the best at doing it, okay? Nobody got into this business or any business because they thought they were second rate. Everybody thinks, I can do it better. There's a product out there. I mean, you can have the greatest business in the world, but if that's not a need for customers, then it's not going to be anything, okay? The thing is everybody always tells me, my son graduated from college or my daughter graduated from college. I want them to go to work somewhere else for a couple of years so they could get a look at what the world is like from a different set of eyes. My advice, don't ever do it. You're wasting their time, okay? My son graduated from South Dakota State. It's a long story how he ended up there. It was for football, but he graduated construction management. He came to work for me 2 years ago. He is so farther ahead than the guys let's be honest, they graduate from college in construction management. They go to work for a big GC. They give them a laptop and a cell phone and tell them to keep track of, the delivery of steel
lumber,
or something,
right.
or lumber, or they're not giving them any responsibility. They're just 22-year-old kids. So I tell everybody all the time, if you really believe in your business, why would you want your kid to go somewhere else and pick up bad habits? Because the habits you have are the best, or else you wouldn't be successful in your business. So my son graduated on a Friday. He started on a Monday, and he's been working for me. And just as a side note, today is July 7th, and I joined the company 35 years ago today.
Oh, congratulations.
Yes. So my father, I graduated.
Oh, you're old.
My father let me have
How
the
old does that
4th of
make you?
July off, and I came to work the next day. My father was so cheap that there was no power in our office because my dad used to unplug the Coke machine to save money. And he blew the power out on the whole building because he unplugged the Coke machine and we didn't have any power. But the point is that these people who sent, I'm not downplaying, I'm just telling you my advice. get your kid in the business early. You know your business. You have a great business. Start teaching him that great business right from the beginning when he comes out of school. If it's high school, if it's college, if it's a graduate degree, whatever. I mean, let's be honest, if the kid's going to be a doctor or a dentist, they don't send him to go, hey, go be a landscaper for 2 years and then come back and learn surgery. No, they don't do that. You've got to groom them from the beginning. So that's my 2 cents of what I have to say about people bringing the next generation into a business.
Absolutely. Dwayne, anything, last thoughts?
Well, it kind of in the vein of what Bob said, I started probably at 15 or 16 going in and just cutting grass, I think there is some value to that in terms of knowing figuring out if that's where they want to be. But the other thing I do caution, and for me it was where I wanted to be, but making sure they have that chance to look around and decide if that's really where they want to be. Because I know as a parent sometimes, and I look at it because I have a 12-year-old right now, and I say, is he going to come into the business someday? And right now he has no interest in anything but sitting around and watching stupid videos on YouTube on his iPad. But, at some point, I'm going to at least make him come in. He's going to get the same treatment I did. Every summer he's going to come in and he's going to work, and if he decides he doesn't want to do that after high school or college, that's great. At least he's been there, he's seen it, he's had some perspective on it. But it is a tale I see a lot in family businesses where kids feel pressured, like, well, I gotta go do this. This is what I have to do. And, from a parent side, ultimately we all just want our kids to be happy in whatever it is they're doing. I'm going to push my kid to always try to own a business no matter what it is, because ultimately I believe that's the only way you really ever build wealth and can take care of yourself like that. Working for someone is always just that. It's a job. But, to find the thing that if this is what they want to do, great. I'm here to support you and grow you and push you and coach you through it. If you decide it's not, I'm still here to help you with all the things in whatever industry it is you choose to go in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, just one last thing for me, I think, thinking what the guys were saying, I think one of the reasons, we've been successful is that, at the base of any strong family is love. And if you can keep that as a priority, businesses go up and down and you have challenges throughout. But, our mom, and my sister's actually sitting right over there, but our mom always, told us that the love of a family is much more important than anything else. So, if you can keep that at the base, then you can, make those structures that Jonathan said, and everyone can have a role. And, you can help, resolve maybe some potential conflicts if you can always come back to that, right? It's your brothers and sisters, and at the end of the day, all you really have is family. So, those sitting in the room, we're beneficial to also create a business with that. And that's something that, it's very challenging, but also equally rewarding. So, okay, it's already clicked. So I guess now we can open up the floor to questions, and Jim has the microphone. Let's see, I see a hand up over here.
Good to see you. Okay. I just saw him from after 2 years, 2.5 years, haven't seen him. I guess the pandemic had an effect. Anyway, I really enjoyed this topic. I have my daughter with me here, so she's part of the business as well. And it's true what you mentioned. I forgot your name, sorry. Bob, you mentioned something really true. I come from a family business, and my dad in the beginning said, go away, work outside, and come back. And I really grew in my industry, and I never came back. And now my daughter graduated, and as a young kid, she want to go and grab a Starbucks, go to downtown, work in a big office, and all these things. But it's true, because I work in a big corporate, many times, and I've seen the interns and the newcomers. They come in 3, 4, 5 years, they learn nothing except one thing. And my daughter now, she gets into planning and marketing and doing all the strategy, doing all the budgeting. And I said, she just turned 23, and I said, what you learned today, I learned when I was like 35 or 40, Right. And I think it's very important. But my question is to you guys, I love what she does, and she does a lot of, I'm from old school, right? And there are a few things I wanted to tell her that, I want to know what's the best way, because there's something, like we do the brochure, and she does a beautiful job in that, like creating and all these things. But the handwriting, it's the most important areas are so small and tiny. And I just, try to tell her, come on, make it bigger. No, but that's gonna look bulky, So these are the things are, as the old generation and the young generation, they like things differently. And we learn different ways. So how can we cope with that? And how can we make sure that we don't step on in their creativity and idea? Because they have great ideas, I have to admit. I thought I'm creative, but young generation are much, much more innovative than us. So how do you cope with that if you have a younger child, like a son who working with you in the business or a daughter? Thank you. My name is Nasser D, by the way. I organize Stone Tech and KBC Expo.
Awesome. So for all those, Nasser asked, how do we cope with maybe the first generation dealing with difference in opinions and maybe ideas of the second generation? So,
That's
Bob, that would be you.
That's an awesome question. That is so true. I mean, the push and pull between, unbelievable push and pull between the three of us, between me and my father and me and my son. You give and take. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, my dad used to yell at me about how hard I closed the door at night when I left. And he said, I didn't build this place for you to tear it down because I shut the door too hard when I was leaving, okay? So those are the little things that, I agree with you. It's just I don't have a solution except you give and take.
You got to leave that night?
I got to leave that night, yes.
geez.
No, I guess the solution is just to give and take. I don't know what everybody else has to say.
I think it's something that you look at, and especially as your children are younger, first starting into the business, is kind of having some perspective of where you think they're going to fit into the business in the long term. And once again, if you've got multiple children, but what are the things they're good at? Is this particular child one that's going to be able to replace me as the head of the company? Is this someone who is more specialized in creative and marketing and is not really going to focus on the business side and going to potentially be the CEO, but maybe a great marketing person within the business? And, kind of understanding where that child or cousin or whoever it is can fit into the mesh there. And, if they're the one that's ultimately going to be the one that can take over the business, you're probably going to butt heads the most with that one because that's really where you're going to see the generational differences of things, But, if you've got someone in a marketing position, I know I'm not strong in marketing. If I had someone strong, I'm going to let them run with it. You've got a better idea than me. I may not agree with it. I may not think it's the best, but if that's what I'm trusting you to run with and I believe you're good at that, I got to let you go with it. But I think there is something to the idea of that not every child will be the entrepreneur that's going to be the CEO of the company someday. They may be the one that is most comfortable doing a much more niche position, which is valuable and great to the company, but to try to force that square peg into a round hole somewhere may not always be the best scenario in that. And I think that's something that, as a parent to look at and try to follow and decide, and help the child come to that conclusion too on their own as to, is this what I want to do or is this where I'm really happiest?
But you got to listen. I mean, I think that's the key is listening. I mean, a lot of times my son will point stuff out to me. I think for sure this is the way it's done. And he's 24 years old. And he's like, Dad, we haven't done it like that in 10 years. That isn't the way things are done anymore. And I'm like, well, 10 years ago to me was like yesterday, But it's all about listening. I mean, I can't tell you how many things he points out to me that we just don't. No, Dad, that isn't the way things are done anymore. It was something just this weekend with the business. And I was like, really? He's like, no, we don't do that. You haven't been out in the field in a while. We don't do things like that anymore. I'd be like, oh, okay. But at least I listened to, you know what I mean? You got to listen. You both got to listen.
Well, if you're talking about marketing, that was one of the topics. Marketing today is so much different than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So if you're going to go with the experience that you had for creating a catalog, let's say from, 20 years ago mentality, I'm sure that your daughter is looking at it more in terms of how this can be digitized or, how can we reach the masses, create this viral environment to get you exposed. And these are the things for the people who, I don't play on Twitter and Instagram. I go to my daughter, ask her how to do it because they're so fluent in it that's really the resource that they can contribute to really help a business. And, you know, I agree. I mean, not everyone is going to be, goes into the business wanting to be the CEO. A family member can be perfectly content with a certain skill strategy. I know people in family businesses, one of the members is very happy just to work in the warehouse. He doesn't want the pressure. He wants to kind of
Right.
be,
Try to put
you know,
people
the
in the right
guy in the
spot.
back office, and that's okay. So, you know, understanding and listening is very important, because it can also tell you what that person wants rather than putting them
you
into
think.
something or wanting them to be something that they don't want to be.
Katie, next question.
Yep.
Hello, I'm Kevin Ray from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It's my wife, Sean, and we are in the flooring and stone business. And I love what you said, Katie, about you know, love being the kind of the thing that mesh your family together. But when I start preaching my core values to my children, they're like, "Daddy, I want to make money." And so, how do you get your children to ascribe and desire to want to be a part of the family business? I heard what you said. You give them the option. You want what's best for them, but what it seems like is they always fall back on mom and daddy, fall back on the business. We're kind of the fail-safe, but I really feel like they're brilliant, and there's a lot in them that we could utilize for our community. So what are some tips that we could do to perhaps make it incentivize our children to want to be a part of our family business?
Yeah, thank you. So the question was, yeah, who dat, right?
Who dat?
So the question was, how can we incentivize our children to really exhibit the core values that you have that led you to start the business and want to work in the family business? So who has children in the business?
Let's go with Bob first.
Real easy. You know, it's a big question. You know, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. My cousin, my children, we have a huge family. My daughter is not in the business. She makes way more money than her brother, who works for me. She is a salesman for Medtronic. She sells some part, I don't even know what she sells. And his cousin works for Goldman Sachs in New York, and he looks at me, but he never questions it, like, because he knows he's part of something. I mean, I think that's what it's all about. He's part of something. Like you said, Katie, that it's a family. And I think his cousin and his sister and all of his other cousins who are in medicine and different, they all make more money than my son. But I think they would trade places with him, because he just is part of something. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, you work for a company that has 10,000 employees. It's not the same as, you know, being the boss and having your own little fiefdom, I guess. It's just, like you said, family. It's all about, and I worried about that too, because I hired my son's roommate. He worked for me 2 years, he quit. He quit to go make more money somewhere else because he didn't feel like he was part of the family. But I thought about that. Believe me, that's a big problem, because kids are come out now and there's a lot of opportunities for them if they went to college and they were in engineering or something else, and they got a lot of opportunities to go make money somewhere else, especially if you're from a small town. I feel bad for people who are from a small town and their son went off to college, or their daughter, and got a great degree. And how do you keep them out of, how do you keep them out of the big city and get them to move back to some of these places? You got to make them feel like they're part of something.
Yeah, part of something, and it's like that bigger picture, right? I mean, help them see there has to be a balance between money and quality of life.
That's it.
You spend too much time at work to not love what you do. I mean, I think having a family business, you truly have to love it. You have to love the struggles and the stress, but then the rewards that come with it. So, just showing them that the bigger, the altruistic goal of what you're trying to achieve. So.
I think it's important that they love the industry too. I mean, we're just talking family business in general. It could be any kind of business.
Yeah.
But if you are passionate about the stone business, those of us who caught the bug, we know that it's something that, it charges you up. When it makes you want to learn more about stone or be a part of conversations. And when you're walking through big cities, you're not looking at the buildings, you're looking at the pavers and the skirting around the
Tile in the
buildings.
bathroom.
Yeah, and bathrooms. You should see me. If I see a good job, I'll in the bathroom take a picture. Because, what happens is it's just showing my passion for my industry. So those kind of things are important. And, it's important to plug the Stone Institute, because there's so many resources to explore and to see if this is the industry that you're passionate about. So it's really great. I think everyone should kind of dip into some of the course materials, or sit in on meetings like this where you can get exposed to industry-related family topics.
Thanks. And Jim, yeah, I think we have another question.
Okay, my name is Maria Vasquez. I'm from Massachusetts. And answer your question in my perspective is now different because it's the first generation, but they were my children who pushed the father to be as a stone fabricator, put in their own business. So they bought and they put all their money, my children, for me, they are 25 and 28, and they put the money from us to have. It's only, and we opened in pandemic. We have been doing so great. Now, my question is, when we build the business, we start with the sharing for quarters. We are 4, 2 children and us. But now they saw us that we really are into that. My husband, 25 years of experience with that. Now I jump being teacher, being in the office. Now they want to split. They want to go to their own business, what they were doing before. How I do that, I put them the same, the sharing, the quarter at 25 each one, or you do less, how do you do? Because it's just the first year that we got the business, and they say, well, you are ready to go, we have to go now, and they are doing the construction, a different business, but
Something
they want
else.
to let us in stone fabrication.
Okay, so the question was, let's see, so you have the company with your 2 children, so you're all 25% owners, and now they want to leave. And the question is, do you buy them out? Do you just take over their shares? Or leave it like it is? Who wants to take that
Yeah,
one?
well, I think this is going to kind of go back to my first point where you need a solid working agreement. And maybe in that agreement it could have been spelled out. I don't want to give you hindsight 2020, but maybe it's not too late because the business is so young that you create a working agreement with particular points that, they're going to go on to another career. They have the benefit of youth on their side. The parents, you're not going to change careers or do different things, so you're kind of stuck with it, or you can get out of it like they did. But in the workings of the agreement, you can spell out what you want and what you need and who's in charge, because that's another thing. If they're going to be silent partners, how silent are they going to be? They're still going to have influence over your business. But maybe it's not too late. Maybe there's still time to sit down and work out, structure an agreement. Do you have an agreement with them?
We did at the beginning, but now they wanted to leave. They said, well, we don't want the money that we put in, but it's now all yours, and we have to go.
So it could be a starting point where you're going to modify that first agreement. It sounds like it was more or less just an agreement about
Verbal
how
or
you're
yeah.
financing the business.
It's a toughie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
know.
since
Good
they
luck.
wanted to change it, I think it's a chance for you to sit at the table and restructure, put it in writing, and maybe invite a third party in, a trustee or just a trusted professional who can help you put it into a legal format.
Yeah, putting something on paper is always very helpful, to follow. Let's see. Yeah, you're welcome. Jim?
Say let them go.
How you doing, guys? My name is Alexander Zambrano from Tampa, Florida. We do restoration of natural stone between my father, who started the company, who's 58, and then it's me and my brother. My brother's 34, I'm 27. So we all kind of work together. My question is how do I approach my father? Sort of the reverse of his question here, because I am 27. I handle the budgeting, I handle the day-to-day, I schedule, I estimate, I do all those things. But when it comes to the solid decisions, my father is in the way. And he's wonderful. Obviously, I'm here on my own representing the company. I'm doing all those good things, and he's a wonderful man. I do, like you said, I treasure the time that I am with him. But he puts a glass ceiling on me that I would like to break through because he's very old school. And there's just a new world out there. My friends are obviously older. Everybody is in different industries. I have contacts. I have connects. I'm in the community. I play softball. You name it.
Right.
But I have a glass ceiling. He's that glass ceiling. How do I break through? Or how do I just break through to him? You know what I mean?
To get them to hear you. Yeah, no, great question. So, question was, how do you break through that glass ceiling, be able to talk to that first generation or whatever generation's above you, and let them see and start to, I guess, trust you more, that you're at the place in your career where you want to start being able to be either, if not make those decisions, be a part of them.
Yeah, I'd love to
Sure.
answer this. So I know exactly where you're coming from, and it's never going to change. So just get used to it.
Just to be blunt.
But learn how to deal with it. And it's not to be confrontational, it's to be nurturing. You know, try to reason and talk it out rather than argue it out. You know, he's your dad, so he's always going to be looking after your interests. He's going to do things that he feels are benefiting you and your brother, but he'll never tell you how much he appreciates you or how much, you know, I mean, that's the funny thing in a family business. The love talk doesn't come out. You have to feel it. A lot of times I learn about how my father felt about my work is from strangers who he confided in and says, you know, my son did this and that. And, you know, it's a warm feeling, but I really wish when he was alive he would have just told me that, because it would have been a lot easier. But I just learned that it's the way that it is. The more you resist or the more you try to inject your philosophy or rules into it, it's going to create, you know, he's going to have more resistance. You know, it's better to do it in a business setting where you're talking to him as, you know, in a group environment where everyone is sharing information, going back and forth, and, you know, and decisions are made together. But if you approach him on the side and you're doing a one-on-one and say, Dad, you know, I don't know why you're doing this. You know, he's going to put his foot down, just like he did when you were younger, and tell you, no, this is what I want you to do. It's for your own good. You know, but if you're in a group setting where there's other members of the business there, it might buffer a little bit.
Don't go to your mother.
Yeah.
Well, the other
I'm just saying, a lot of people go to the wife thinking she's going to talk to the husband, and that sometimes angers them. The only thing, I didn't mean to interrupt, but the only thing that worked for me is when an outsider, like you said, like we had a lawyer that took care of our law stuff once a year, and he would bring it up to my father. I would whisper in his ear, you know, and then he would tell my father, you know, your son needs to you need to give some shares to your son. You need to do this. You need, you know, because he wouldn't listen to me. But he would listen to our lawyer, who was the family lawyer, because you need a lawyer, or an accountant.
Yeah, some
everybody has an
confidant,
outside
right.
accountant, and the accountant would tell my dad, because my dad would have he thought he was going to live to 100, and he was going to give me the business on his deathbed. But you need an outsider to tell him that's not going to happen.
It's always better coming from someone else.
Exactly.
The other thing I would consider too, and I don't know the exact dynamic in some of these situations, but I've always used my father in that side as more of a sounding board in that sense. So anytime I've gotten it, even when he was still much more dominant on the day-to-day stuff, was, you know, come to him with an idea, but don't just come and say, I think we should do this. And he goes, no, I don't think we should do that. But I think we should do this. Here's why. Here's what the research. Here's the packet to support this decision. This is why I think we should go this way. All right, now, Dad, poke holes in this. What's the problems with my theory? Let me help fill, you know, and to kind of engage in that kind of almost a developmental process. Because I think it lets your father see that you're really putting thought into these things and you're taking the steps to really figure it out versus just going, hey, I think we should do this. Just because, oh, well, I saw a commercial about this, so I think we should do it. You know, take those steps, put together the research, come with a real plan. And involve him with, hey, here's a plan I got. Where do you see holes in this, Dad? What's the, and kind of work that through. And now as I've gotten much farther out where Dad's not involved in it, I still go to him on things, even small things sometimes. Just, hey, sounding board. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's why I'm thinking it. You see any holes? So that keeps them in that involvement and shows them also where you're coming from, where your thought process is, and gives them the confidence. Because ultimately they turn over that control when they have confidence. And to keep building that decision by decision, day by day, new project by new project is how you ultimately break through that glass ceiling. The glass ceiling's there because they're still in the, I know more than he does. At some
Right.
point in that, and I can't say this for every father because I'm sure there are some out there that never think you're going to get there, but at some point in that, if you can continue to build that confidence, you will you'll take on more and more, and they'll be more comfortable stepping back more and more.
Katie, we've got about 7 minutes. Any other questions?
No?
If you're thinking of it, others have probably thought of it too. So, all right.
Come on. Spit it out.
They just realized
We're
they
going
had
to
the same
argue over
question
who's
and
going to
didn't
ask
know.
what question here.
All right, just curious, it can be a smaller question so you can still do her question. How do you, if you're working with a family member and it's maybe not the right fit for them, how do you manage keeping that family relationship but then not having them work with the company based off of skill set, performance, etc.?
Sure. So question was, if you have a family member maybe in a role that's not suited to their skills, how do you deal with that? Would that be?
How do you fire your family?
Yeah, it's like uncomfortable. Maybe I can speak from something. I work with 5 of my 6 brothers and sisters. And, it definitely was challenging. I mean, I'm one of the older ones. I'm the second oldest. And we had some younger ones who, they thought they wanted to wake up and be Katie. And, they're 10 years younger than me, right? So it was about showing them, look, not like you have to start at a certain level, but, I've been working in the business for 10 years already. So I think it's about really showing them what paths need to be taken, right? What they need to do, and that they kind of need to not prove themselves, but almost prove themselves. Look, do this job and do it well, and show me that you're not just a sales consultant. Show me that you're the best sales consultant, right? Because you're also an owner of the company. And I think it's empowering them to really, shine, that then they find their little groove and their niche. Now, it's definitely harder when they're totally not in the right spot, and you have to have hard conversations. Does anybody have one of those stories?
Yeah, well, I think it's a scenario of also distinguishing jobs from ownership to some extent too. I think what you'll find a lot of times, if you see a family member who is not performing well in a position, they know it too. If there are clear expectations that, okay, I've got my cousin is hired as my commercial sales representative. He's got expectations of what he's supposed to be achieving and what his targets are and all those sorts of things. And he knows he's compensated for that position. But, and I'm not saying this is happening because I just hired him a couple months ago, so we're not at that point. But
This is a cousin?
decades in the past, the same cousin worked for me, and we went through those scenarios. But he saw where he was failing in his job at that point. They know it. They may not
Right.
come out and admit it, but if they know this is my job and they know they're not doing it right, sometimes sitting down and having that conversation
It's like a relief.
is the relief
yeah.
to them too, because they're fighting the same family dynamic. They're sitting there going, geez, I know I'm not doing a great job at this. I'm not happy doing this. That's probably why they're not doing a great job, because they're not happy with it. But I don't want to let my sister down, my brother down, my dad, whatever it is. So I think as awkward as it sometimes feels, the best thing is to rip that Band-Aid off and have that conversation. Because I think you'll find that they probably are recognizing the same things you're seeing and are equally embarrassed or too awkward to have the conversation too.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. Okay.
So we have a family business already, and not in tiles, but we are trying to get into the tiles and stones business. And I, first of all, really appreciate all the questions, every point you've said about family business. It just stuck right. It's like, oh yeah, that happened to us. Oh yeah, that happened to us. So we really appreciate the pointers that you've brought up, each one of you. We really thank you. So we are trying to get into another business, and now we are in the beginning of getting into a family business, which looks like it's a long-term business to get into. You've been here for 35 years. So we kind of need a little bit of guidance as to to how do we get into this. We already have a business friend who already has expertise in this business who's helping us through this, but we are getting in together as a family to kind of grow this in that sense. So we really need a guidance to see how we can be successful moving from the get-go.
From the get-go. So, question being, maybe how do you structure an initial family business where, is that your 2 children? It's your siblings. Okay, so how do you structure a family business from the beginning for the long haul? Yes? Okay.
You would know more about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, so my family's business, Triton, has been in business for 15 years. And let's see, at the beginning, you know, my father had other companies. So the ownership was structured where he was the majority owner and all 7 children had a small percentage. I think it was like 2%. But he really wasn't involved at all in the business. So eventually he then turned it over to equal ownership with every child. And, you know, again, I think that helps because we are all owners, right? We're all his children, but we all have different jobs. So I think it's what Dwayne said as well. It's important to segregate ownership with the job description. You can't have 7 bosses, right? You can only have 1 or 4. So I think it's really important that you know, and to Jonathan's point, you write down the structure in terms of the org structure, you know, your job description, and then the ownership structure should be different.
Did your father give you more of the shares, or is it still the
Nope,
same?
it's all equal.
It's still equal.
Yep.
I haven't dealt with it as much from a family on the share ownership side, but over the years, we have brought in local partners in different facilities and, you know, high-performing employees in areas that we gave pieces of the company to. Where we had these, you know, somebody owns 5% kind of things. And I will tell you that universally for us, it was always a failure. Every time we tried to give someone a small piece, and it has not worked out. It's ended in legal battles, in lawsuits, in settlements, in all kinds of things like that. In my opinion, I wouldn't go to the extent where Bob's dad was going to hand it all over on his deathbed, but I think, much like he said, in terms of over time, if it's centralized in one person, if there's a clear heir apparent where it's going to start making those kinds of transfers, the ones who were only ever going to be the best saw operator in the company, give them cash along the way. You know, those kinds of things. But I think from our personal experience, bringing in and having people with smaller pieces of the company, it's frequently caused problems. It's always great in the beginnings, you know,
Katie,
but
you
at
say
some point.
you say it can work being split 6 ways.
7 ways.
You know,
Yeah,
you have 4,
absolutely.
maybe 4 ways, and it can work.
I
The
mean,
fact that you split it 7 ways and it works is just a tremendous
Well, it speaks
attribute.
to
That's a lot of love.
at the base of love, right?
That's a lot of love. Yeah. I mean, no, I would usually tell somebody it can't work to split a business 4 ways, but you're proving every day that it can work to be split 7 ways. That's amazing. That's terrific.
No.
But you can break down the responsibilities. You know, obviously the person who's traveling the most, taking the most risks, maybe having to be away from their family longer than the other sibling. Maybe the shares of the company can be, you know, broken up evenly, but the compensation may be different. Because you're taking time away from your family,
Absolutely.
you're traveling, you're sleeping in hotels in different towns, and there's some members of the family that don't want to travel. They like sitting at home, and they get to enjoy the comfort of being in their home with their families, while we're in like quarries and going to strange places and eating food and maybe getting sick and losing sleep. And so, and that's something that was never sorted out in my business. So that's a bone of contention I've always had, because I was the one traveling, and I saw great benefit in that. I think that really shows the leadership, where you are the face of the company, seeing the people, going to the shows, but it comes at a cost, because you're taking time away from your family. in my case, if I could be compensated more, maybe there'd be
Absolutely.
some balance.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Speaks
that's
to
one
the
of those
different
things
jobs.
that we overlooked when we made our agreement. My father made the
Your
agreement.
father. Well, I think that's all the time we have. I really want to say thank you for all the questions and your attention. So, Jim, is there anything else?
Just to say, all of our panelists are on the board of directors of the Natural Stone Institute. We have a booth down on the trade show floor. They'll be willing to stick around. We have another session in this room at 11 o'clock. So if you want to stay and ask questions, but on behalf of all of us, let's thank our panelists for their time today.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Oh, that was at 11.